community was already mad.
Undereducation, lack of employment, poverty.
We're being left out. Nobody knows it. Nobody sees it. Nobody cares. It's just a matter of time for somebody to strike a match. Things get burned up when blacks get pissed off.
103rd Street was totally burned down. That looked like that was a war zone. That's something I'd never seen before.
It was actually called Charcoal Alley because of all of the damage that was done.
4th of July, like the 4th of July, there was fireworks, there was gunshots, crackling from the burning buildings.
Everything was gone. Everything was gone.
People were afraid. I mean, people holding up in their houses and stuff like this here, we're afraid.
Moms had me up under the bed, up on the floor, and all we can do is listen, pray that nothing didn't come in our house.
They do not understand what it's like to be here. I don't know if they'll ever get it.
Years ago, Watts was home to the most destructive riot in U.S. history. And now, 50 years later, the shadow of that rebellion still lingers. I'm Michael Brownlee.
And I'm Carolyn Johnson. This is where it all started, the intersection of 116th Street and Avalon Boulevard, near, but not in Watts.
The summer was muggy, the tempers were hot, and the tension between the community and police was simmering.
It all came to a boiling point August 11th, 1965.
Young black man stopped in a blue pickup truck and he said, "See that guy going north? He's either drunk and he's speeding."
The driver, 21-year-old Marquette Fry. The traffic stop, routine, until the California Highway Patrol insisted on impounding the car. Fry's brother walked 2 blocks to get their mother, Rena Price. She arrived to a growing crowd and her son in handcuffs. She scolded him and he pushed her.
Marquette became violent, profane, threw a couple of profanities at me, stepped slightly to the right, took a swing at me.
A scuffle broke out, and within minutes, all 3 were arrested. By now, the crowd was restless. Rumors spread that police roughed up a pregnant woman, and the crowd became irate. What happened next was something never before seen in an American city. 6 days of unrest, 34 deaths, nearly 4,000 arrests. Buildings on fire. Stores and pawn shops looted. Cars flipped over on their sides.
It was about finding and seeking out enemy, and the enemy was a black and white car with police in it.
The National Guard moved in with machine guns.
I can remember in the alley, and us trying to get these Molotov cocktails, 7-Up, hard, heavy 7-Up bottles like they don't make anymore, and filling them with gas and putting in the wicks and everything and throwing it.
It was like being in a war zone.
At $40 million, it was the largest and costliest urban rebellion of the Civil Rights era.
The people who were there remember it like it was yesterday. The smell of smoke, the sound of gunfire. The street we're on right now, 103rd, was nothing but ash. The riot changed the scope of the community they called home, and the memories are forever etched in their minds. Here's Tony Ginyard.
Stories about life in Watts in the summer of '65 have been passed down for generations. This version from 3 people who had front row seats but very different views of the Watts riots, 6 days of hell.
The unemployment, the job opportunities, nothing was here.
Now, we already mad. So when you're already mad, it don't take but a little thing to explode you.
The little thing leading to an explosion of anger labeled the Watts riots was a traffic stop. Sweet Alice Harris was a beautician living in the Jordan Downs housing projects.
Watts had got upset and had started going in them stores.
Jarrett Fellows Jr. was 12 years old. He lived in the projects too. Betty Pleasant was a reporter for the LA Sentinel. She went wherever rioters would go.
And started tearing up stuff. And so I followed them, I went with them. And they went down to 103rd Street, and then they started tearing it up and set fire to it. The Wire is sending this information over to my newspaper, and they're all concerned. So they kept telling me to bring your back here. get back here. You know, I said, no, I can't leave now.
The headline that hovered over her first-hand account, I dodged bullets while LA burned.
My photographer and I were shot at by the National Guard.
I told them we were going to fire a few warning shots in the air to keep them back, that we mean business.
They started shooting at us before they could see our trespass, you know, but they didn't hit us. But I sure wrote about it, so some shot at us.
She wrote, "We dodged a hail of bullets when we were caught in crossfire between police officers and hidden Negroes."
Governor sent in the National Guard, and everything just got a lot worse.
That Friday morning, they came and said the army was coming.
Seeing those guys in those trucks and those helmet and guns, that's something we'd never seen before except on TV and John Wayne movies.
The children was coming through screaming, saying, they burning the kids up, they burning up the stove, they gonna burn up the kids. They had a bottle in their hand, it was a Coca-Cola bottle. It had juice in it. They had a rag on the top of it. And then they would take that lighter and light it, throw it, and say, boom! And the fire started. We begged them, don't throw that in that stove. Let us go in there and get them kids out.
The black community was under siege.
103rd Street was totally burned down. That was a war zone. That's something I'd never seen before. And as a 12-year-old, that shocked my senses. Everything was gone. Everything was gone.
Yet children being children played.
We used to play a game called National Guard. We made our own guns with sticks and rubber bands and the little axle. We used that as our propellant. And we would run around the community saying, halt, halt, that's what the National Guard said.
I had to save it. If I was gonna live here, I had to save this.
Over the years, Harris has taken on the role of mother protector of Watts, even pushing presidents to see the community through her eyes. Fellows long ago put down guns made of sticks, finding power in the written word as publisher and editor of the Compton Herald.
If Black Lives Matter, then we have to matter to each other and stop killing ourselves.
Pleasant is still reporting from Watts.
It opened my eyes. You know, there's some people who just don't get it. Don't get it.
As she did that hot summer in August of '65.
The rebellion revealed deep fractures in Watts. It reopened the wound between the mostly white law enforcement and the black community. And in many ways, that wound is still open. So will it ever heal? Here's Patrick Healy.
Hey guys. Some call it the future of policing. You guys like baseball cards?
Yeah.
A footbeat, but more.
Ooh, they're from the Dodgers, huh?
Before we do any enforcement, we want to try to foster a relationship.
These are my officers. They're here to protect me, and I love that protection.
It's happening in the public housing developments. In Watts, for decades, the epitome of police community disconnect.
50 years ago, law enforcement used to stop us and call us boys. No respect.
Says LA Police Chief Charlie Back.
But all the things that tie us to community didn't exist in '65.
Outside minority communities, the LAPD of half a century ago was widely regarded as the model of modern policing.
The story you are about to see is true.
An admiring TV show polished its image, but Watts exposed shortcomings.
You had a small police force that was doing no community policing, that was riding around in patrol cars, faceless, just looking to make arrests.
In his book To Protect and to Serve, author Joe Dominic made the case LAPD then was oblivious to the community's needs and to what would be ignited on that hot August night when a CHP traffic stop of a suspected drunken driver unleashed a growing crowd's fury.
They're caught utterly flat-footed.
I never got the feeling that we really knew how to address this problem that we're now faced with.
The first reaction was, here's all this going on, let's just let it burn itself out and it will go away.
Later Chief, then rookie Bernard Parks had joined the force then only in the initial steps of desegregating.
There was distrust internally as well as externally.
The '65 riots were a beginning of a huge change in policing in Los Angeles, and it didn't all occur right away.
This year going to be even better if we continue to strive and do what we need to do.
The Watts Gang Task Force, launched a decade ago, meets every Monday.
We the one that really showed people how to partnership with the Los Angeles Police Department and become a team.
You guys are making this place safe.
I'd like to say that I came on during a time where the LAPD was still learning how to ensure the department represents the communities that they're policing.
Since 2011, Sergeant Imada Tingarides has run the Community Safety Partnership for the Public Housing Developments. These officers in Jordan Downs, they're on the CSP team.
What's up, man?
Our job is to build relationships with the people that live in the community, to broaden the communication, and to make it safe so that kids can grow up and thrive.
There's a lot of problem solving going on in here.
From the get-go, Sergeant Tingarides has had an ally and then Southeast Captain, now Commander Phil Tingarides, who, like his wife, grew up on the South Side.
Every single one of those programs has a purpose. For football, it helped us erase gang lines because we had kids from each of the developments that had been gang rivals for decades who were now coming together to watch their kids play.
We call them the power couple because they fight for the same thing that we fight for.
The State of the Union is
For President Obama's State of the Union address, when the First Lady invited the Tingarides as her guests, it was a compliment to Watts as well.
It made all of the difference in the world, having someone who really believes in the neighborhood, who's from the community, and who understands all of the community dynamics.
Don't shoot!
But across the nation, police uses of deadly force against African Americans have drawn renewed protest and energized the movement known as Black Lives Matter.
The police abuse is really kind of just symbolic of a larger kind of looming oppression that ties black people to the lowest rungs of society.
And distrust does remain among many in the projects.
As soon as you answer the question, are you on probation or parole, literally Dr. Jekyll turns to Mr. Hyde.
I argue with the police all the time, but now, I'm more relaxed. I'm more open to their presence. What they here for?
There's growing consensus the bonds established in recent years will help Watts and LAPD survive inevitable rough patches.
It isn't whether or not things go wrong, it's what does the organization do about it.
Is Watts a success story?
Oh, absolutely.
If we're going to move forward as a country, we can't leave any neighborhood behind. And Watts isn't just an important Los Angeles neighborhood, it's a great American neighborhood.
But some people say there's a dark side.
What's it like every day living here?
Hell. It's hell. You hear gunshots every day, every night.
The sound of gang violence now, reminiscent of the riots then.
The most difficult periods were those of evening and night hours.
And rarely seen footage shows the National Guard getting ready for something no one's ever seen before. Each uprising starts with a moment, a word, a misunderstanding. These are the faces at the center of a dark time in LA's history. CHP officer Lee Menicus. He died of cancer in 2013 at the age of 79. Rena Price, who threw a punch at Menicus while trying to protect her son, also died in 2013. She was 97 years old. Price is seen here in this LA Times photo during a court hearing with her sons, the Fry brothers. The one on the right is Marquette Fry. His arrest touched off days of violent clashes. We reached out, and both the Fry and Menicus families respectfully declined to be interviewed for this broadcast.
But we did come across this rarely seen footage. Film the Los Angeles City Clerk's office had stored away for years. It shows behind the scenes as the National Guard prepared to move into Watts.
It took less than 2 hours to assemble the battalion.
A camera operator with the National Guard shot the film. Fires, looting, rebellion, and arrests as Los Angeles police and guardsmen came face to face with frustrated mobs ready to fight. The National Guard has used this film to train members on how to respond to riots, from controlling unruly crowds to taking on sniper fire. There's more than 30 minutes of these rarely seen images. We have it posted right now on our NBCLA app and NBCLA.com. Just search National Guard. The year was 1965. Skateboards were the newest craze. Turn on the radio, you heard Wilson Pickett leading the R&B charts. Gas cost just 31 cents a gallon. A loaf of bread, 2 dimes and a penny. By this time, many African Americans had moved out of the South, settling in communities like Watts. Conan Nolan shows us the Watts that was.
It is like any other community, with its hopes and dreams. Where families grow, opportunities are sought. Just miles from the seat of power, but often seeming a world away. A neighborhood with its own history, both proud and troubled. Such as that hot August night 50 years ago.
A lot of looting, burning. It was frightening.
That they were making Molotov cocktails right by the house.
Those who survived that night, that week, say what happened is not reflective of the community they called home.
I had never seen or heard anything like that.
It started as a collection of small farms and ranches, part of the Mexican Rancho Tejada land grant that slowly broke up once California became a state. Then, around 1900, the Pacific Electric Company wanted to build a railroad through the region with connections to the new Port of Los Angeles and the towns of Long Beach and Santa Ana. The company named the junction for the property owner who offered the land for the depot, Charles Watts. Latinos, African Americans, and whites arrived, many to work for the railroad, a major employer. One Italian immigrant was Samuel Rodia, who in 1921 would begin an art project that lives to this day. And Los Angeles itself was growing, largely with transplants from the Midwest. Raphael Sonnenschein is director of the Pat Brown Institute at Cal State Los Angeles.
We had a lot of whites coming from the Midwest who wanted LA to be kind of a small Midwestern town. It was largely operated by a fairly homogeneous white leadership.
And while arrivals from the Midwest had made LA one of the whitest cities in America, World War II brought in scores of African Americans from the South to work at defense plants.
And they had high expectations, but then discovering things like segregation. There were, until the 1950s, restrictive covenants that prevented people from buying homes in white neighborhoods.
Following the unrest, LA became more racially polarized as ever. Mayor Sam Yorty and Police Chief Parker blamed outside forces, in part the news media.
The police versus the people, as if they were a couple of gladiators in an arena.
This riot was triggered by the California Highway Patrol, as you probably know.
In Watts, those who could afford to moved. Rebuilding efforts were slow in coming, and there was more unrest in the years to come. Today, Watts has started a new chapter. Still working class, but now predominantly Hispanic, with investments slowly returning. Arturo Ibarra is with the Watts Latino Century organization.
Housing environment, commercial environment, and especially bringing jobs into our community.
Change reflecting the one thing that, despite the community's troubles, has never left: hope.
Sense of knowing how I've gone to the place I have as a person, as an Angelino, as an African American man.
Evan Jackson, a recent graduate from Princeton University, is part of a new generation, wishing to learn the lessons of that which took place in this neighborhood a half-century ago.
One incident can remind everyone that things aren't as the way they should be and the way we would like them to be.
Some call it a riot. Others say it's a revolt, a rebellion, an uprising. But one thing was clear. In 1965, the people of Watts had enough. It took 6 days to settle the crowd, and once the flames died down, a new movement took hold. Civil rights became Black Power.
Different approaches, same goal, a movement to restore self-respect and combat racism. But slowly, one by one, the nation's most influential leaders were taken out, incarcerated, and assassinated.
So who would lead the people? With many black leaders gone, bloc leaders moved in. They battled over streets and corners, and to them, it was a matter of life, death, and loyalty. This new element walked in color, divided by red and blue, and the neighborhood was never the same. Here's Ted Chen.
We heard just pow, 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 pow. You know, it just sounded, it wasn't like firecrackers. And my house got hit right here.
Gunfire has become a regular part of Latrell Weidman's life. The bullet holes in her house are from earlier this summer, and just a few days later, her son Deontay was shot in the arm while walking down the street.
The bullet stuck. It's stuck in my elbow right here.
What's it like every day living here?
Hell. It's hell. You hear gunshots every day. Every night.
The family lives near 115th and Avalon, just a block from where the Watts riots began 50 years ago. It is also the center of gang activity in Los Angeles, which means Deontay has to be careful about where he walks and what he wears.
Walk around with blue, somebody might think you're a Crip. Walk around too much red, think you're a blood.
So how do you avoid that?
Try to wear colors that ain't blue and red.
The most notorious rivalry in the history of gangs began on the streets of Watts, as portrayed in the 2008 documentary Crips and Bloods Made in America.
I've been blessed to come up out of 4 life sentences, been on my deathbed twice for that line once, and I'm still here.
William Jackson and Cornell Ward are former Crips, in the thick of it when LA exploded in gang violence in the 80s and 90s, fueled by crack cocaine. Coach Ward, as he's now called, was a lieutenant in the drug empire that employed both Bloods and Crips. That is, until the birth of his child changed his heart.
My child was birthed as a crack baby. She could fit in the palm of my hand.
Ward and Jackson now work with Chapter 2, a South LA group that tries to steer young people away from gangs. A dramatic turnaround also for Jackson, who Latrell Weidman remembers as a hardcore Crip, and now he mentors her son.
You have to work hard on your grades, because it's just not about the sports. Okay, you can excel in that, but if you don't have no education behind that, then what? We have to find out what it is that our communities need. What do they want? If you can pull me away from this, what do you have to offer me?
Jackson spends his days with Deontay and his friend DeAndre White, 2 teenagers who've been in and out of juvenile hall and who face the daily pressure of joining a gang.
Stay out the way so I don't get, hit, shot, whatever, jump.
You don't know nothing about that.
Sounds like you really care about what happens to them.
Yes, I do.
Most of LA's homicides are gang-related, but they've dropped dramatically since the 90s. More than 1,000 in 1992, the year of the LA riots, but less than 300 in each of the past 2 years. Much of the credit goes to gang interventionists like Chapter 2, working together with LAPD officers like Sergeant Mark Durrell.
We can't do it all. Everybody thinks, oh, the cops got to be able to fix it. It's a community. It's everybody.
Durrell is the face of the LAPD in Watts. Lately, he's had to answer questions about police tensions with the African-American community. But they all seem to agree that when it comes to gangs, things are better than they used to be. But they also say a lack of resources and programs and grinding poverty still put too many young people at risk.
I went to a school one time and the kid said, man, I'm glad they're serving food this morning because it wasn't my turn to eat last night.
My turn?
Yeah, see how that hit you?
On the day of our visit to Latrell Weidman, candles marked the 2-year anniversary where a friend was killed right in front of their home. Deontay still has a bullet fragment in his arm from when he was shot, and the bullet holes in their home remind him and his mom that 50 years after Watts fired its first shot, there's still a war going on.
So when you hear Bloods and Crips, what is that as a mom?
Waste. It is a waste. That is ridiculous. Bloods and Crips, I mean, what are you getting out of that? What is it doing for you? Where, you lose your life or you're in prison for the rest of your life.
I guess they'll say family. People
family,
care about you.
Family, God is your family. That's who your family is.
There's a whole lot of people, just like me, who wake up every day
They're not Crippin', not Bloods. I believe that this is the season for good people to win.
But no one said it would be easy.
Sometimes in this neighborhood, people have this mentality that it's actually the poorer that you are, the better.
Someone told her,
have a kid, the government will help you, as opposed to going to college.
But she made a different choice. Her story next. Those who grew up in Watts in the 1970s watched as their community struggled to rebuild, only to watch it torn down again by crack cocaine and gangs in the 1980s. Angie Crouch met up with a woman who left Watts hoping to build a better life with her children. But it wasn't long before she returned home with a new vision.
So this is the area where I was told that I was born.
45-year-old Marietta Scott has returned to Jordan Downs, the public housing development in Watts, to show us where her journey began.
Not sure which unit, but upstairs in the bathroom.
On a hot August day in 1970, Scott was born to a single mother on the floor of a bathroom in Building 86.
Her water broke in the bathroom, and I started to come immediately.
Scott says her mother was neglectful due to drugs and alcohol, so she and her 4 brothers and sisters were sent to live with her father and his parents in this house just outside of Jordan Downs. Despite her inauspicious birth, she remembers her early childhood in 1970s Watts as a happy time.
It was fun. Everyone looked out for everyone.
But all that began to change in the 1980s. By the time she was a young teenager, crack cocaine and gang violence had taken over her neighborhood.
I started to see my friends' parents get hooked on drugs. My life changed from me and my friends sharing shoes and clothes to some of my friends stealing from me.
Scott's protective grandparents forbid her to walk through Jordan Downs and sent her to a school outside the community for gifted children.
Although I loved my community and these people that I see and I see the changes in them, I love them. Yet and still, so it was heartbreaking, it was embarrassing to bring my friends from my schools into my community.
Scott knew that education would be her key to a better life, but she got pregnant right out of high school. And it wasn't until the 1992 riots that she realized she had to make a change.
At that point, I just kind of made the decision that I didn't want to raise my kids here, that I had seen enough, especially after my first son was born. Shortly after that, we had the civil unrest.
Scott packed up her 2 young sons and moved to Long Beach. She made her way through college, eventually earning a master's degree.
I wanted them to see someone in our family graduate from college.
Scott thought about leaving Watts behind for good, but her love for her community wouldn't let her stay away.
I'm hearing of my peers that I grew up with, their children are being killed. I'm hearing of the constant raids in the area and how the children were affected. You ready? You're gonna slide again?
And so Scott returned, first as a teacher.
Where's our new friend?
And now as a supervisor with Children's Institute, a nonprofit that operates Head Start programs in South LA and Watts.
It's crucial to have leaders and staff like Marietta, both because there's just already a built-in element of trust. She is of the community. She has been through some of the same things that the children and families now are going through.
I'm Marietta.
Scott returns to Jordan Downs to recruit children for Head Start, hoping early intervention and education will give these kids a chance to succeed like she did.
Looking at this building, coming into this community, it makes me strive harder. It reminds me that there are a lot of children that are coming behind me from this community, and I have to do all I can do while I have the opportunity to be a decision maker. We're going to be going door to door, recruiting children in Jordan Downs for the Head Start.
Okay.
Okay.
I surely will. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, take care.
Returning
ladies.
to her roots to extend a hand to the next generation, showing them by example, no matter what your circumstances, it's all right to dream big.
It's really surreal. Sometimes I just think about it and I have to know that there was something bigger than myself that guided me to be here. I'm here for a reason, and I have to make it count.
For some young and old, Watts is all they know. Moving on and moving out is merely a dream. And in many ways, getting pregnant is easier than going to college. One student actually wrote an article about it, and she shared it with our Gordon Tokamatsu.
People who are trying to get a degree.
We caught up with Shanice Joseph at a summer program for teen girls in Compton.
How many of you guys get bored?
On her own time and her own dime, she's teaching them about her journey to a college education.
I want everybody to stand up.
It's not easy, she tells them. In fact, it's so tough for girls here or in nearby Watts, where she grew up, that it brings her aunt, Janice, to tears.
I really needed them. I needed my peers. So you guys, you need each other.
Janice and Shanice did have each other, the elder woman inspiring her niece by example.
She has family, she's married.
But many do not. In Watts, the percentage of homes where parents are unmarried is among the highest in the entire city.
There are no resources for post-high school students.
Shanice took us on a little driving tour of her neighborhood where she explained what she believes is the problem. Listen to what her friends told her when she was thinking about dropping out of community college a couple of years ago.
They tell me straight out, have a kid, the government will help you, as opposed to going to college. This is a clinic.
She showed us her neighborhood where several agencies and centers provide everything from health care to counseling.
There are at least 3 to 5 from this park to my house, which is like a 10-minute walk.
But she says such services focus primarily on pregnant teens or those who've already had children. Even job opportunities, in her experience, are offered first to people with felony records or children. College-bound single people like herself, not so much.
If I have a kid right now, under age 24, I can get more money to go to school. I can apply to live in my apartment complex. That means I don't have to live with my grandmother. I could live right next door to her.
Shanice says in many ways she simply doesn't fit in here, not because she made the wrong decisions, but because she made the right ones.
Not to take anything away from the families that need it, I just feel like it shouldn't be limited to one category.
She became so frustrated that she wrote an editorial with the headline, "In Watts, it's easier being a pregnant teen than a college student." But as she was writing, and later when she was deluged with emails from online readers who told her to hang in there, she realized that she had a bigger responsibility. To Watts, where she wants a new generation to see education as the answer.
I haven't given up on Watts because I believe it has a lot of potential. I'm a living example of that.
I'm a student at Long Beach City College.
But most of all, to herself. She smiles broadly while talking to the teenagers about how a college degree has to come first, then family, then life.
What are her chances?
She's already making it happen. Her chances are great.
It's not easy living out here.
Someday, Shanice wants to become a mom herself, just like her proud aunt who recently had her first baby at age 33. But for now, she's back in college, working to become a teacher or journalist. And one day, she wants to start an information resource center so kids here will know they have better options, not just easy ones.
It's something that's needed now.
In Watts?
Yes.
And there's hope for Watts, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
If you're from Watts, all that you're limited by is your own imagination.
So what's next for the community? For starters,
One of the first sit-down restaurants that we've seen in Watts in over a decade.
but why did it take so long?
Watts is a community that has been absolutely misdiagnosed.
So if you drive around Watts, you'll want to ask yourself, what happened? Why hasn't Watts made the progress other areas of LA have over the past few decades? I walked through Watts with LA Mayor Eric Garcetti. I got his take on what it's going to take for Watts to thrive.
How are things in the neighborhood? What can we be working on?
Wilbur's complaint, illegal dumping going on catty corner from his home.
Call us and I'll make sure we get some more crews out there, okay?
Problem solved here today, but there's a generation's worth of concerns still to tackle.
How far has Watts come over the last 50 years?
Well, I think Watts in many ways is indicative of the progress that we've made and the challenges that remain. This is a safer community. There's infrastructure that's here that wasn't. The income level is one of the 5 poorest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. But as a community, that we still struggle to find those dollars to have affordable housing, to have job training, to bring the investment
That's because the federal dollars once committed to fight the war on poverty in cities like Watts, as Mayor Garcetti puts it,
those have been decimated.
How frustrating is that for you?
We can't retreat from our cities right now. So I find it very frustrating.
So as Washington retreats, the mayor ramps up his pitch for a Watts renewal.
Especially in communities like this that are starved for investment, starved for good food, starved for decent grocery stores and decent produce, you can make money. So we're making that case.
And guess what? Some in the private sector are listening. Chef Roy Choi will open Watts' first sit-down restaurant in 10 years. Then there's the Kids Music Academy Red Hot Chili Peppers co-founder Flea has promised to bring to Watts.
We're bringing Steve Jobs' widow, Lorraine Powell Jobs, is coming in here to create College Track, which is a proven college graduation program that gets involved early on in young people's lives. We have to think not just what can we do for this year, but what do we think for a generation, so that we have the next Mark Zuckerberg being an African-American woman or a young Latino male growing up here in Watts. There's a kid in Watts right now who's going to be my successor, who's going to be the mayor of Los Angeles, who could be the next great entrepreneur, a doctor, cure diseases. And you've got the legacy of perseverance here.
You're really optimistic.
I am. We want to make sure that Watts thinks of itself not just as important in the past for what people saw on television, but that it makes something bold for the future. And 50 years from now, we'll be talking about a completely different Watts. Nice to meet you. All right. God bless. Take care. You too. That's as great as any neighborhood in the city.
A couple of other things happening here. A new skate park will be built right here at the base of the Watts Tower. And within the next year or two, the mayor says a local arm of City Hall will open right in the heart of Watts, allowing for government presence 24/7.
Perhaps no community in the country is saddled with such a stigma. The very word Watts can evoke memories and images of violence 50 years ago. But ever since then, one woman has led a crusade to shine a positive life on the place she proudly calls home. Knowing a bright future depends on rectifying a dark past. Here's Robert Kovacic with her quest and her legacy.
I'm from Watts. I don't care who knows I'm from Watts.
It is practically impossible to know these streets without knowing her name. The housing project known as Gonzac Village, the grove of trees in the park dedicated to the woman and her late husband, who never walked away from Watts.
I chose to stay here, and I've raised my family here.
Here in this house, her family's owned since 1944.
You want to judge me by my zip code? That's your problem. But I know who I am.
Just who is Ozzie Gonzac?
And then we have Pete Wilson.
The walls of her home, room after room, are lined with decades of accolades, from politicians to police chiefs. One credits her for creating the motto of the LAPD.
What does LAPD represent to you? What does it mean to you? Well, it meant to protect and serve. To me, that's what it always meant.
But perhaps the one achievement she is most proud?
When we formed an image committee, it's terrible when a community has an image that's portrayed like they're the worst people in the world. We're all gang members. We're all hoodlums. And that is so ridiculous.
So, Ozzie Gonzac and other prominent citizens set out to champion their hometown in the wake of the uprising.
Watts is a community that has been absolutely misdiagnosed, I'll say. It's been called everything except a community of people who care.
It was vibrant with businesses, barbershop.
One of those people who do care is Ed Rice.
Clothing stores.
Today, there are only a few storefronts on East 103rd, and Rice owns one of them, a flourishing Popeyes. But when he tried to attract another well-known chain, they told him,
well, we're not doing stores in the ghetto.
We are being disregarded.
Perhaps no one knows that better than Ozzie Gonzac's daughter, Barbara Stanton.
Since the rebellion in '65, we have nothing.
For 15 years, she's been trying to turn an empty lot into a cultural crescent.
It's not a dream for you.
No. I'm not dreaming.
The Watts Star Theater and Education Center would not only provide training for young people, but would also be Watts' first movie cinema since the riots took the last one away.
To have a theater in our neighborhood will be transformative.
Barbara remains dedicated to her neighborhood. After all, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
What is that, Mom? When I see her struggling and fighting all these years, I feel, what did I do to my daughter? Why did I tell her that? Because any place else it would have been up and going.
Even now, a 90-year-old icon continues her quest to protect and serve Watts.
You're still fighting to change the
We're
image.
still fighting because we're still being punished for something that happened 50 years ago.
What I know about music and what I've learned about music has come from South Central LA Watts. And these are the same hallways that I walked in from high school.
But even before him, there was him.
And the things I need.
And him.
A real big gap.
And him.
Between the young and old, that's a generation gap.
A group known as the Watts Prophets.
Between charity and greed.
When people think of Los Angeles, this is what they see. But just 10 miles from the hustle of Hollywood,
many people don't know how rich Watts is, but we're very, very rich culturally.
A community with its own landmark, its own walk of fame, and a historic cafe where everybody knows your name. A coffee house reopened 2 decades ago by Desiree Edwards, a woman with a mission to feed the community and nourish their souls.
And I'm telling you, there was nothing in here. The place was empty. But I walked in here and something just was like, it captured me.
What's Happening Coffee House is where it all started here. I mean, people said this was the best thing happening in the neighborhood. And so this really is almost a reincarnation of the original.
Exactly, because it was across the street. So I just was brought in here to bring back a foundation in the community. And then, it shows pride in the area, because how could you have an area this large and not have, more than one sit-down restaurant? I wasn't put here to become a millionaire and make a whole lot of money. I was put here to make a difference, to allow people to come over here, sit down, have a quality meal, enjoy a restaurant-style environment in a walking distance from their home.
And it's like a museum.
It is. Well, it's nice when you can come in here and you can sit and, people look up and they're like, I remember that record.
Are those your original Susie homemaker
Yes,
ovens?
yes.
So this has been a passion.
Christmas 1967.
You're not just feeding the community, it's so much more to you.
I try to feed their soul in addition to their stomachs,
The way locals remember it, the What's Happening coffee shop was the place to be in the 1960s. You never knew who you were going to run into here, and 50 years later, the same is still true. The coffee shop rose from the ashes following the riots and became sort of a base camp for civil rights efforts. So much history in this place. This is where artists, poets, and musicians gathered, including the Watts Prophets, who paved the way for the West Coast hip-hop movement. Here's Beverly White.
The troops are massed in the gasoline loading area of a Richfield station. They are about ready to deploy and sweep this area.
Any look back at the days of outrage and violence in Watts from 50 years ago would be incomplete without the Watts Prophets. Southern California's 60s-era spoken word artists chronicled the mayhem, pioneering a style many call a forerunner to hip-hop.
Folks say, between the young and old, that's a generation gap.
3 young poets, Otis O'Solomon, Amdi Hamilton, and the late Richard Dido, bonded in the Watts Writers' Workshop, transmitting street stories mixed with jazz into America's conscience.
A gap between the way things ought to be in reality.
The Watts Prophets are proud of their legacy, whether it's widely known or not.
Another day of trying to open an area of expression for those with no area of expression, because that's where we found ourselves in the 60s. With no area of expression. And that's how this music, rap music, came about, opening that area of expression.
When most people think of Watts and art, they naturally think of the Watts Towers. Simon Rodia's handcrafted masterpiece took 33 years to build and was already 9 years old in 1965. Whereas the Watts Prophets emerged from this same community right after 1965 with a brand of artistic expression that influenced the world.
Yo, I got a sibling stuck in the system, another victim, he sits in prison, awaiting his redemption.
Modern artists celebrated the elders at this recent Watts 50th anniversary concert.
I am an offspring of the Watts Prophets. I am an offspring of their tutelage.
As images of Watts on Fire projected overhead, we spoke backstage at downtown LA's Grand Performances with the last of the Watts Prophets.
I see things that we went through many years ago, and that a lot of the youth, not just the community in general, continue to go through it right now.
The past is history, the future is mystery. Now is new.
O'Solomon and Hamilton remain observant and hopeful.
You just say, I think the good outnumber the bad, even with all the stuff that's going on.
Pledging allegiance to the evil in who we are.
Trusting emerging new voices to help keep society from repeating mistakes and to call it out when it does.
People revolt because five things. Poor schools, poor housing, police brutality, no health care, and no jobs. That's what caused revolts.
I'm very happy to see that the youth are listening, and some of them are trying to do something about what they see today.
There are a number of success stories that have come out of Watts. One person in particular, singer and actor Tyrese. He's blown up in recent years, made millions off of his success, but as Kim Baldonado tells us, he still returns to Watts to give back.
What is it like for you to come back here? This is your old high school.
Well, this week specifically means a lot being here because my music, what I know about music and what I've learned about music has come from South Central LA Watts. And these are the same hallways that I walked in from high school.
Locke High School opened in 1967, created in response to the Watts riots, with hopes of providing families with a safe and secure school. But Locke has had a turbulent past.
Obviously, we're hoping that we don't get killed on the way to school. We're hoping that we don't end up being another positive, good person that happens to live in this community that don't end up getting hurt or going to jail for something they didn't do.
But Tyrese says his time here wasn't all bad, and positive things happen here daily.
There's a whole lot of people, just like me, who wake up every day. They're not Crippin', not Bloods, not a part of no Latino gangs. They're not waking up every day with evil and malicious intentions towards everybody. But the overall community, Watts, Compton, Long Beach, ends up getting this negative reputation because the cameras normally only show up when something bad happens.
I can't do it.
The cameras are focused on Tyrese now. He's world-renowned for the Fast and the Furious and Transformers movies, plus 6 solo albums. But it was a phone call while he was in Watts that launched his career.
I was in this classroom. This was it.
His life is a whirlwind now, but he hasn't lost sight of giving back to the community where it all started.
The reason that we're here today is because you earned it.
This is my message to the world, to every man, woman, and child. Where your life and your career starts will not dictate what the outcome of your life and career will be. I believe that this is the season for good people to win.
For all the changing faces of Watts, there remains a feeling of hope here. The Watts Rebellion was a turning point, a call for change, decades in the making.
Well, now 50 years later, despair is met with hope, hate with love. There's still so much work to be done, but the future of Watts is now in the hands of the bright minds that live here. I'm Michael Brownlee.
And I'm Carolyn Johnson. We leave you now with one of those faces of the future with a voice rooted in the past.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I found was blind, but now I see.